Circle IPO'd, and the IPO performance has been phenomenal the last 2 days. I think before the show I checked, it's like valued at 23 billion and change.
Jesus.
I mean, just for comps, it's something like 60% the value of Block and
wow,
yeah, 40% the value of Coinbase or whatever, right? So why would it be valued that much? Well, it's got, I mean, we can look at Tether as well. Tether's much bigger, and I don't know what they're valued at, but it seems like they would be valued at like 100 billion or more, probably more. There's 61 billion in USDC issued at 5% treasury yields. That's 3 billion, I believe, something like 3 billion of profit per year just by having this money sit in the bank. Now, there's a partnership with Coinbase, and then Circle also does partnerships with other companies as well. So they don't necessarily get to keep all that money, but there's a lot of money generated from that 61 billion. That 61 billion has doubled in the past year, and by anyone's estimates, stablecoins are just going to continue to skyrocket. So it growing to like $1 trillion seems, inevitable, or like
for stablecoins to go to
stablecoins in general, almost inevitable that it'll be trillions. And then USDC is like the number 2 player, and you can make an argument that they'll become the dominant player. We'll talk a little bit about that, because we've heard other things.
Spicy.
We've heard other people say that Tether's already won, but if I believe the investment thesis here is that stablecoins, multi-trillion dollars, USDC will at least be the number 2 player, if not become the number 1 player, and capture $1 trillion plus of that. And then just the treasury yields alone, I mean, you just like sit on the beach and literally do nothing, basically. Although, apologies to Alex. Alex worked there 2 years and did sales. So there's a few people that are needed. But basically, it's not that hard you don't need a lot of people at that business to generate great profits. And then that 3 billion, can easily turn into like 50 billion. It's obviously, a risk is it's a function of
interest rates,
right?
Yeah.
But in today's environment, you can imagine generating 50 billion in cash flow every year. Well, I mean, of course you're going to value a business at 23 billion if it generates 50 billion in cash every year, even if it has to like split that pot with partners. It doesn't have to capture that much of it to be worth $23 billion.
Right. Do they have a few major partners? Like you mentioned Coinbase. Is Coinbase like one of the dominant partners, or are they one
they're
of
they're a special partner because they created USDC.
Yeah.
So no one else created USDC. Circle and Coinbase created it, and then they blew up that partnership, or they didn't blow it up, but they modified that partnership so that Circle sort of owned it, but then Coinbase captured a sweetheart economic deal out of that.
And we
so
don't
there's
know
no other partner.
Roughly what that looks like.
I've heard a couple stories from different highly credible sources that are not exactly the same, but mostly overlap. So if someone goes and partners with Circle, and the USDC is minted by Circle and then custodied on the Circle platform, then Circle gets all the revenue from the yield, and then can negotiate with the partner how much they get. If Coinbase custodies the USDC, and someone goes and partners with Coinbase, then Coinbase gets the revenue from the yield and can divvy up as much as they need to in that negotiation with the partner.
Right.
My 2 sources agree on that part. The part that but there's maybe differences. If it's non-custodial, if the USDC is not custodied on either of those platforms, but is like in Phantom Wallet or in some other wallet or whatever, or in a partner's wallet, like Robinhood or Block or PayPal or whatever, then one source says that it's a 50-50 split between Circle and Coinbase. So I don't know what the real story is there, but regardless of the actual answer, like Coinbase basically has to do no work at this point and gets a lot of money. But if you partner with either of them and you create value, meaning you get people to mint, use USDC, mint more USDC, then you're going to get value as well. So, when Circle signs these partnerships, they're doling out some of this money to partners.
Why did Coinbase? It feels like Coinbase had a lot of the, let's say, initial, like the ingredients that enabled this thing to get off the ground. And if everybody's should otherwise be sitting on a beach and there's not that much work to do, like why would Coinbase not just do this themselves? Why did they choose to partner for it? I
don't know. And maybe they regret it now, right? Because I mean, there's rumors that Ripple's trying to buy Circle, or was trying at least before they IPO'd, and then I mean, the rumors were like for 6 or 7 billion, and Coinbase lowballed at 5 billion. Well, now it's 23 billion, right? So
right.
I don't know what's true versus not true regarding that, but
I wonder if there's regulatory reason to keep them separate too. I don't know what that would be, but
I mean, I have no idea. I would guess they'd regret not bringing it in-house 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So two things to bring up for this. One is, for anyone that's listening and doesn't fully understand what we're saying, I think this is important to explain. So these companies, what happens is they issue $1 as a stable coin. They can then go and buy $1 worth of US treasuries, which is giving them 4 to 5% risk free. So that's when Steve says they can sit on the beach. It's literally because they're just collecting free yield from the central bank, paying them out. That's what's happening. And so what's interesting there then is, I mean, there's so many interesting things about this. One is Tether is the absolute dominant player, and we're going to talk about some of the possibilities of how dominant they could end up being. But what's interesting is, in some ways, because Tether is a bunch of Bitcoiners, this is like actually a stealth way to like accelerate a Bitcoin standard, because Tether is taking a huge chunk of those profits themselves and just buying new Bitcoin, which is accelerating the whole feedback loop for Bitcoin in the first place. So that's interesting. Two, actually, let me reframe this as a better way. Is it credible for Circle or anyone else to even compete with Tether? We also have a mutual, very credible source, who I guess I mentioned this was my biggest takeaway after the lightning routing stuff from the Bitcoin conference, saying it's ridiculous to assume that anyone can even compete with Tether, and specifically Tether on Tron. So there's the question of the stablecoin issuer and then the network they're using. And his point was that Tether on Tron is so dominant everywhere except in the United States, which I guess the United States, obviously people that are using this in Coinbase, they have to use Circle because Coinbase only accepts that. But I guess his argument is that's like such a small use case compared to the people that actually want effectively dollars outside the system, which are the people outside the United States, that it's such a dominant runaway network effect that almost no one can catch them. I've heard 2 arguments to me that I find credible that would say, actually, no, you're wrong on that. And those 2 arguments would be, number one, if you can find a way to share that yield with customers, that the customers would be price sensitive enough to move. And so there are other products I've heard where, and this is a big debate about being in the United States versus not, and some of the regulatory actions, because I know there's a bill where banks, potentially could try and issue stable coins and share, and they would not want to share that yield, but then offshore could. But so imagine if I'm making 5% as Tether, I give 1% to you, the user, and then someone else comes in and says, well, I'll give you 2%. So there's, I think, a question of how price sensitive is the end user. I think that's a real debate. Some people would say users don't know, they don't care. Others would say it's going to be extremely competitive, cutthroat market, and it's going to drive that margin down, making these not good businesses. The second credible sort of issue I've heard is not that Tether is itself in danger, that they're still going to dominate versus Circle, but that the network itself, which is that even if Tron, which it's crazy to me that Tron is where all this is happening, like Justin Sun, like how did that fucking happen? That's its own interesting question. But that even if Tether's already won and people aren't really sensitive, oops, sorry to the microphone, they're not sensitive to the, splitting that yield. Could this come back to the Bitcoin network via Spark, via Taproot assets, or whatever, something else? And then the only credible argument I've heard there is if the volume of payment flows goes so high that it would crowd out the limited block space on the centralized provider, whatever you want to call it, but let's say a blockchain, Tron, that prices spike. In that world, could that price action be enough to drive people back to using Tether on Bitcoin or Lightning?
Yeah. So many.
So much there, I know.
And we have at least a minute to go.
We have 1 minute.
This is a 60-second talk.
We'll go over a little bit, I think. But clearly Tether is the dominant player right now. I mean, there's no disputing that. The numbers are obvious. To the point though that like it's already game over and they're going to dominate. Not only Circle and USDC can't compete, but no one else, like Lightspark, Lightning Labs, no one else, like PayPal has a coin, Kraken and Anchorage have a new coin that no one else can compete. I think that's we cannot make that call right now. It's far too early to make that call. I also think there's like so many variables in this that it's not going to be winner take all. Just the regulatory question. There's going to be like players that are going to be all buttoned up and completely play the regulatory game. They're going to have certain advantages and certain disadvantages. And then players that are like a little more on the edge are going to have advantages and disadvantages. So just that division. But there's a lot of other variables as well. So I don't think it's a winner take all. I definitely don't think Tron is has anything captured. First of all, the history, and I'm not even saying that. You plug in any name you want. I'm not picking on Tron.
Yeah.
But
and if you are, it's okay.
Already looking at Tether, though, the history. I mean, it started in Bitcoin, then it moved to Ethereum, then Tron, and now it's on Solana, and now they're introducing it on RGB. They're introducing it on Taproot Assets. They could very well introduce it on Spark. So like Tether's doesn't care. They just want like a reliable platform that is cheap. But
also one that users have a wallet that can accept that, right?
Yeah, but history has shown like that can. So yes, but I mean, history's already demonstrated they've moved platforms numerous times, and I don't see that stopping.
But there are some network effects to that, right? Like if everybody in your small town in, I don't know, Venezuela or something is all using Tether on Tron, and you want to accept payments, you're like, no, we're going to use a different blockchain underlying. Like, what is that? Yeah. Just give me the money.
But that's why like Bridge.xyz and other swapping providers and Taproot Assets and Spark just naturally do swapping as part of their architecture. So you can have Tether on Tron, I can have Tether on something else, or USDC on something else, and we can pay each other.
I think the question would be, I generally tend to agree with you. I'm just taking the devil's advocate on this, which would be in the past, maybe there wasn't enough of a network effect already established. So the question would be like the countries of Argentina, Turkey, and Vietnam, if, 90% of the population already has wallets that take Tether on Tron, are they ever going to switch? And maybe,
But here's an example where you don't even know what's happening. Yeah. So like Ryan Gentry posted that he went to Steak and Shake and he paid with Tether.
Yeah, it's crazy.
How did he do that? Does Steak and Shake know anything about Tether? Does their software stack or their system, they have 3 providers they partner with. Do any of them know anything about Tether? Actually, one of them does, but it doesn't need to. Because the way the payment, like you can have a wallet that supports Taproot Assets and Tether, and you've got Tether in your wallet, and then it can recognize a Lightning invoice for Bitcoin, and then the payment route goes from your wallet to the node it's connected to, which then swaps the Tether for Bitcoin and then completes the payment along the standard Lightning network in Bitcoin, and then Steak and Shake receives their Bitcoin. So Steak and Shake doesn't, and like someone was joking about fart coin could be used, and so you can literally go to Steak and Shake and pay with fart coin.
How did you know what DK had filled up on his wallet when he wanted to pay?
He was very excited when Coinbase Assets tweeted yesterday that fart coin is available on Coinbase.
Is it really?
Thank God.
Is that new?
Coinbase Assets.
Wow.
Yes.
What a company.
So Steak and Shake can accept any of these coins and doesn't even have to like provide the infrastructure for it. So that's like a real world demonstration of Taproot Assets doing that swapping.
Super cool. Yeah.
So, well, first of all, for a healthy financial system, I think it's really important for there to be many issuers and not one winner.
Right.
But let's talk about reality though. My view right now, Tether definitely is in a super strong position. I think they're like an amazing, as a company, they're in business, very strong position. But even though I think they'll continue to succeed, I don't think they'll be, I don't think it's a winner take all market. And I don't think they'll have 100%. I also think they'll definitely continue to explore moving platforms. So like Tron is definitely not like the long-term winner here.
Yeah, and the thing you said that's always resonated for me very, very strongly is as the Bitcoin network itself continues to expand. And remember, the Bitcoin network has layers. There's layer 1, which is Bitcoin now, layer 2, which is Lightning. But there's so much momentum for Bitcoin that, like, for example, when Square accepts Bitcoin Lightning payments, And now I have an option. If I want to pay at a Square terminal, and I can either, and I, whatever, I've got Tron on that speaks Bitcoin, or Tron that not Tron, Tether that speaks Bitcoin, or Tether that speaks Tron. Square's not going to accept Tether that speaks Tron. They'll accept Tether that speaks Bitcoin. So I think, to me, I know it's going to take some time to play out, but I think the long-term vision of Bitcoin, the network winning, is that it is TCP IP for value. And there's only one protocol. It's like, I joked at this when we had our AI hackathon, like, who here uses the number 2 protocol for data transfer, the number 2 protocol for the web? There's one. It's only one. And so if you want that Tether or whatever the stablecoin is to win, it needs to speak Bitcoin somehow. It could either be natively with something like Taproot assets, or it could be bridged in. I still think there's a huge opportunity to build a Lightning Network bridge between the shitcoin chains and Bitcoin, but it somehow needs to speak Bitcoin. Number 2, it needs to be able to facilitate the kind of payment volumes we expect in the future, which means it can't be done on a centralized blockchain if you expect to have trillions of payments per second. That just can't scale. So that's another reason I'm bullish on Lightning in the long run.
Last comment here before we wrap up. Maybe Austin says, I thought Tether had less transparency than Circle in terms of reserves. I don't know the latest status. I assume Circle, being a U.S. company, regulated, I assume they are like quite transparent.
Yeah.
Much like any other public, like a Coinbase or a Block or another American public company. Tether historically has definitely been far more opaque, but they've become more transparent over time. And I think, there's been tons of FUD about Tether, which I've always been critical of, even though I've never had like insider knowledge to know whether do they have the money or not.
Yeah.
I had no idea. But when I looked at all the criticisms and the analysis saying they don't have any of it, none of it held. The analysis didn't hold water, and I just found this came from like university professors like at Texas and a prominent blogger from Stripe who otherwise people think is really smart. And in this case, these people completely botched this analysis. They just didn't.
They just had bad data, or they just had like a point to prove.
Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
They're
just haters. It's kind of like instead of so there's TDS, Trump Strange Syndrome, and EDS. I guess there's like a BDS or CDS, Cryptocurrency Derangement Syndrome. Why has no one ever said that?
Right.
Maybe I just
coined that.
Maybe
You just coined it on
But
term.
it really it's really a thing, right? So I think it's that. But in any case, there's been so much evidence over time I think it's pretty clear Tether has the money, and they claim to be over collateralized, and I believe them.
They're making
even
billions of dollars
when the
in
market
profit,
dumped, like crashed a couple of years ago, they redeemed more money faster than any bank in history. I think we said it on the show. I had the numbers, a few weeks ago on the show. So I think there's, and also they've been cozying up with the U.S. government more and more over time as well.
Mm-hmm.
They freeze transactions. They apply OFAC rules. And so, and they historically don't even allow employees to travel to the US, but Paolo was in Vegas last week.
And doesn't Cantor own 5% of it?
Yeah. And so there's just more and more partnership and
tighter,
budding up.
yeah.
Because I think the United States finally realizes, oh, this is a great strategy for the US dollar.
Yeah. It's really good for us.
So
yeah. One last thing I want to say, so we don't totally rug pull our guys as well. And I think we can get much deeper into this on a future episode, but I know we were teasing sort of like Wall Street and Bitcoin and stuff as well. While stablecoins is the story, I do just want to give one quick shout out. Circle raised about $1.1 billion yesterday, I believe, in the IPO, or whenever it was. I think it was yesterday, right? MicroStrategy launched a new product, Stride STRD, which is one of their mini bond offerings, which raised the exact same amount in one day. So that's a teaser for the future, but all I got to say is the deeper I go down the MicroStrategy rabbit hole and understand them potentially repricing all treasuries, like, oh my God, it is blowing my mind. And that's a teaser for next time.
Yeah.
Awesome.